Rich wrote in the June issue of Psychotherapy Networker, we're grappling with an emergency at once global and personal, like the likes of which we've never seen in our lifetimes. And it shapeshifts by the week. We can stock up on all the toilet paper and Lysol we want, but we can't predict what will come to pass in 2 weeks or even in 2 days from now. Those words are so prescient. Obviously now, not having Rich here and not expecting this to have happened, I imagine many of us are feeling this way to learn about Rich's death. David, you wrote in April in the Harvard Business Review an amazing article that went viral and was shared widely. And I was grateful to be sharing it, grateful to you to be able to share it with many people that I work with. It was called "That Discomfort You're Feeling is Grief." And you talked about the pandemic's influence, the effects that it's having on us, that we are grieving, whether we realize it or not. How is grief a part of what we're going through in the pandemic?
Sure. Let me connect the dots on this, if I may. I think, so many people in March, I think we're feeling it again, and throughout these past months have said, I don't know, I'm just feeling so heavy these days, or I cried last night, or I didn't want to get out of bed this morning. And, for me, they were describing grief. I'm like, that discomfort you're feeling is grief. To really understand, and a lot of people heard this when I did a podcast with Brene Brown, this idea that the world we knew literally last year is gone forever. And everything has changed, from just a hug to another person to handshakes to can you do a movie theater anymore? Is that going to be part of our future? And what are restaurants going to look like? And are you going to pass the salt through the plexiglass? I mean, it's a whole loss of a world we knew. At the same time, I tell people there's macro and micro losses. In other words, big and little. Obviously, the loss we're talking about today, the loss of someone we deeply love, Rich Simon, the loss of someone, a person who died, is the biggest loss. And yet, there's also weddings that have been postponed, jobs that have been lost, restaurants that have closed, conferences canceled or move online, human connection. And sometimes we want to go, yeah, but that's not a death, so it doesn't count. And the reality is they do count. It is grief. And the last thing I want to say on this is, sometimes we get into this comparison mode of, well, which grief is the worst? And I always go, the worst grief is yours. And besides that, I think about there's enough room in the world for all our losses. I was talking to someone who was crying about her wedding being postponed that she'd been dreaming about since she was 5. And after we talked and she walked away, the person I was with said, oh my gosh, does the woman not realize your son died? I mean, she's going to have a wedding again in a year. You're never getting another son. And I said, you know what? The world is big enough for all our losses. Her grieving over the loss of her wedding does not take away from the grief of my son. All of our losses get to coexist without taking away from one another.